Hi there. So in this video, we're going to be looking at public policy and externalities, which I got to admit, I really like this topic. I geek out on it because it's the intersection of economics and like making the world a better place. So that's kind of the neat thing about this. So anyways, check out this module. I can't just say like, hey, you guys are the future leaders, blah, 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 blah. Check out, read this module. There's some really cool stuff in here. Save the world, please. We could use it. Number one, check your understanding. Some opponents of tradable emissions permits object to them on the grounds that polluters that sell their permits benefit monetarily from their involvement in polluting the environment. Assess this argument. So that's a valid, viewpoint, but it's wrong. Like there's this idea where it's called a cap and trade system, where basically you issue a certain amount of permits to all the different polluters, and it's slightly less than basically the market amount. And so you issue the socially optimal amount, and then everybody gets a certain amount of the permits. And if you pollute, then you need a permit in order to pollute. Well, if you're a heavy polluter, you have to have more permits. And so you would basically, you would have to buy permits from the other polluters. Well, some polluters, right, are not as polluting. They're not as bad. And it incentivizes those to improve their operations, even if they're still polluting a little bit, and then they sell their permits to the other polluters. And so this argument is flawed because we'd say the polluters who sell their permits, and we'd say who permits and benefit, because they're polluting but not as much, are still incentivized to reduce their pollution. And we'd say that what it also has the effect of doing is that the people who are like uber polluters, they have to pay more. And that's exactly what we want to do. We want to internalize that negative externality. So economists around the world are like, cap and trade systems are the bomb.com. You got to basically, you put a cap on the amount of pollutants, and then you let the polluters trade among themselves. It's worked wonderfully to solve the acid rain problem. It's been fantastic. The economists also love carbon taxes. Carbon taxes are often paired with cap and trade for a similar reason. And so we can't talk enough about how you could solve climate change. It's not like this crisis that's looming over us and we're like, what do we do? How do we get away from carbon? Use a carbon tax. Duh. Like, we've been talking about this in economics for decades. You could solve climate change overnight. Blink, carbon tax, done. Cap and trade, done. Hard to design, right? Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that this is like a simple thing, but we have a solution, and it's a market solution. That's what's mind-boggling, right? Anyways, all right, I'm gonna get off my high horse here. Number two, you can tell I'm a big fan. Cap and trade, very cool stuff, along with carbon tax. Number two, for each of the following cases, explain whether an external cost or benefit is created to identify an appropriate policy response. Trees planted in urban areas improve air quality and lower summer temperatures. That's true. They do. So we'd say extra benefit. So governments should do that. They should plant more. They should plant more trees. And in fact, they do. In where I live, in St. Louis City, they will come and plant a tree for free for you because they know that it's actually pretty beneficial to do it. I have a tree in my front yard that's planted for free by the city of St. Louis. B, water-saving toilets reduce the need to pump water from rivers and aquifers. That is true, they do that. The cost of a gallon of water to homeowners is virtually zero. So there is a external benefit from the toilet, we should say, of the toilet. So governments, in order to convince people to use them, because otherwise there's no reason to buy this toilet, governments should subsidize the toilets. Subsidize them. We don't typically do that. That's not the actual policy response. What we've been doing is basically just banning high water use toilets, which is not, again, it's not a market solution, and it's actually probably less efficient than doing this. If you just subsidized the toilets, you'd have the socially optimal quantity of water-saving toilets would just be that. But I think probably there's feelings of like discomfort about subsidizing toilets, but we subsidize energy efficient appliances. There's tax credits for that kind of stuff. We do it all the time. Old computer monitors contain toxic materials that pollute the environment when improperly disposed of. That's an external cost. I don't know why I put 3 there. External cost. So government should tax it, should tax disposal. And that they actually do that as well. If you have a big, like heavy cathode ray tube television or a cathode ray monitor, that if you're not familiar with a CRT, they're the great big ones that are big and heavy. The problem with them is that the glass inside of them has it has all kinds of heavy metals that are very dangerous. And so, in fact, if you want to throw them away, you actually have to have them properly disposed of, or else the heavy metals will leach into the soil and hurt Mother Gaia, Mother Earth. That would be sad. So we tax them. Actually, we do that now. Number 1, multiple choice. Which of the following policy tools is inefficient even when correctly administered? I'm going to do these going down. Let's see how that goes. It's the emissions taxes are fine. Environmental standards. Environmental standards are inefficient because what they do is they apply the standard to everybody, and it doesn't necessarily like actually change the quantity based on the market solution. A better solution would be using like emissions taxes or a cap and trade system, tradable emissions permits. A Pigouvian tax is an emissions tax, and tradable emissions permits are cap and trade programs. Those are the more efficient market solutions. But environmental standards they're just not efficient at actually solving the problem. Number 2, an efficient Pigouvian subsidy for a good is set equal to the external benefit. So what is that? D. Number 3, which of the following is true in the case of a positive externality? So in positive, you've got a social benefit that's exceeding the private benefit. So society benefits more than just the individual. So that would be C. These are great questions, nice and easy ones. I like the easy ones, right? Which is an example of a source of external benefits? Technology spillover, that actually is one. The rest of these are not. B and C are negative costs. D and E are responses. So technology spillover, I didn't really talk about that in the lecture. That's more like the idea of like if you use technology, it can also benefit me if we're on the same like social media network. So we call them network effects or network externalities. And so that's A. Like Facebook wouldn't be particularly useful to anyone, assuming that it is. It wouldn't be particularly useful to anybody if there were only like 2 people in the world using it. But the more people that join the network, the more valuable it is. So the internet kind of functions on that whole idea. Marginal social benefit equals marginal private benefit plus marginal external cost or marginal external benefit. So that's A. I almost talked myself into the wrong answer. All right, let's take a look at the free response. The use of plastic water bottles creates external costs as a result of plastic production, bottle transportation, litter, blah, 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 blah. Correctly labeled graph showing how the market will determine the quantity, show the marginal external cost, socially optimal quantity, size of a Pigouvian tax that will be used to achieve the optimum quantity of water bottles. So we actually see this kind of stuff with plastic bag bans too, where people talk about, should we just ban them? You probably shouldn't. You should probably put a tax in because there's a private benefit curve, right? And that's equal to the social benefit in this case, because we would say that there isn't any external benefit aside from drinking water and being good for you, I guess. Then you have a supply curve that's equal to the marginal private cost, but it's telling us that there's some extra cost here. And therefore we have a social cost curve that's higher. The amount, right, of the distance between the two is the marginal external cost. And that is equal to the size of the tax that would solve it. We know that the market would produce QM, and we know that the optimal quantity is smaller than that. And so I think that we did everything we needed to. Socially optimal quantity, size of the tax. Yep, bada bing, bada boom. See you later.